And we're going to be continuing this evening in the book, Deceptions Concerning Yahweh's Calendar of Events. And it's a little bit of a challenge because we've got an older version of the book and a newer version of the book. And I'm using the newer version of the book, and I know the pages kind of differ slightly. But on the new book, we left off on about page 47, and I believe in the old book it's right around page 40. And where the Great Khan left off last week was beginning the section called the Tekufa and Jewish astrology. And this evening's class, as we get into it, and we're going to see, there's a lot of technical reading, a lot of the stuff it gets kind of technical, it gets kind of confusing at times. So Yahweh willing, what we're going to do is just kind of hit the high points here, the ones that, especially the things that Pastor has highlighted. And the thing I want everybody to remember as we do go forward through this evening is the whole purpose of what mankind has done in doing this, and they've complicated something that's very straightforward and very simple. Has anybody ever hear when you were little, there was a game at one time, a board game called Mousetrap? Anybody ever hear about that or see that? Basically what it is, it's an elaborate thing. It's an elaborate device that is constructed to do the very simple task of catching a mouse. Okay, and basically what takes place is, and this isn't all the steps, but just to give you an idea of what they've done, of what mankind has done to turn something as simple as looking for the new moon of green ears, looking for the green ears of barley, and looking for the new moon immediately after that. What they've done is complicate it, and this is going to be demonstrated tonight. You're going to see it, and it might kind of boggle your mind, but don't let it confuse you. Don't let it overwhelm you. Just look at it from the standpoint of they've done this to confuse the people, is what they did. But in this mousetrap, basically what you had to do is you had to turn a crank. This crank did something that kicked this bucket over, made a ball go down over here. It hit this point over here, causing something else to fall. And 3, 4, 5, or 6 steps later, here comes a little cage down to catch the mouse. Okay? They turned something very simple into something extremely complicated. Okay? And this is what mankind has done with these astronomical calculations, but they did it very, very carefully. It was very deliberately that they did this, and they did it with the sole purpose of taking Yahweh completely out of the equation. They want to take Yahweh completely out. They want to remove His control. They want to remove any part that He has in this. They want to remove it out of there, and they try to explain that away through these calculations and through this and through that. And we're even going to see some of the arguments and stuff that are taking place among the rabbis or the rabbs. They were. I think that was the first level, if I remember correctly. That was one of the first levels of masters or teachers was rab. I think he had rabbi, and rabboni, if I remember correctly. But you'll see that they even disagree themselves on how these things are to be done. And so you've got this argument that's going on between them, and it's, again, they've taken something very simple, and they've turned it into a whole mess. But again, it's been used to completely take Yahweh out of the whole equation. And one of the things that they've done is that they've taken this word tekufa, as we learned last week, as the Great Khan started, and as we're going to continue today, and they've deliberately mistranslated it. They've taken it and they've twisted the meaning behind that. And back a page over, about a page and a half over from where we left off, It says, this lie that is now being taught in some of the assemblies, and they are using Yahweh's name to teach this lie, is the lie of always setting the new moon of green ears after the vernal equinox. And he says, Pastor says, beware of this lie, reject this lie, and turn to Yahweh with all your heart. Remember going through this, Yahweh never, ever, ever tells us to look at the sun to determine how to set the feast. Never. You search it from Genesis to Revelation, it's not there. But this is a device. This is what mankind has come up with in order to separate man from Yahweh. These assemblies who set their religious festivals, these assemblies who set their religious festivals, but definitely not Yahweh's feasts by the pagan vernal equinox, they make all these false statements. And the Great Kahan, he covered that. He covered it last week. But when these feasts are not set according to Yahweh's statutes, according to His judgments, according to the way that He instructs us to, then it doesn't matter if they're, how they're kept. They're not Yahweh's feasts because they weren't brought about. They are not brought about in a way that Yahweh recognizes, and He won't recognize them unless they are set according to the way that He tells us to do it. But we left off here again on page 47 in the new book, page 40 on the old book, and there's a couple of scriptures I'd like you to keep. Would like everybody to kind of keep in mind. If you take a look here in Jeremiah chapter 11, if we take here in Jeremiah chapter 11, let me see if that needs to go up a little bit. Okay. You can see there, it says in Jeremiah chapter 11 and verse 6, and it says, and then Yahweh said to me, proclaim all these laws in the cities of Yada and in the streets of Jerusalem, saying, listen to the laws of this covenant and do them. Listen to these laws. And we're dealing specifically now with the laws of setting the new moon of green ears, of setting the feasts. For I solemnly warned your fathers in the day that I brought them up from the land of Egypt, until this very day, rising early and solemnly warning them, saying, obey my voice. And verse 8 shows, yet they did not obey, nor did they pay attention, but everyone walked in the imagination, the stubbornness of their evil heart. Therefore I will bring upon them the judgments, or they bring upon themselves these things, because the judgments are set. Because they violated these judgments, the curses of the covenant which I commanded them to perform, but they did not keep my covenant. So as a result of them not following these things, they're going to experience these curses. Continuing on in verse 9 there. It says, and Yahweh said to me, a conspiracy is found among the men of Yada and among the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Remember, it was the rabbis, it was the teachers who were responsible for teaching the law and making sure that the law was taught. It was a conspiracy that was found among them, among the men of Yada. They have turned back to the iniquities of their forefathers, who refused to listen to my laws, and they have gone after the hinder gods, because remember, that's what's behind setting up these sacred poles. That's what's behind following after the solstices, following after the zodiacs. It's the gods that are behind these things is what they have turned back to in order to serve them. The house of Israel and the house of Yada alike have broken my covenant which I made with their fathers. Therefore, this is what Yahweh says, behold, I will bring grief upon them, and which they will not be able to escape. And though they cry out to me, I will not listen to them. No, because remember, Isaiah 59, 1 and 2 shows that their iniquities, it's the pushing aside of the laws, replacing the law of Yahweh with their own traditions, has caused Yahweh to hide His face, so He will not even listen to them. Verse 12 shows, then the city of Yada and the inhabitants of Jerusalem will go and cry out to the gods whom they offer their incense, but they will not save them at all in the time of their trouble. The gods are powerless. The gods can do nothing. They can do absolutely nothing. Now, if you continuing on the same line, let's look over at Ketzkiah chapter 22. It says, there is a conspiracy, and verse 25 says, there is a conspiracy of the prophets, of her prophets in her midst, Like a roaring lion, they have roaring lion ravening the prey. They have devoured souls, and they have taken the treasure and the precious things, and they've made many widows in the midst of her. Now you think about the history. Remember the history that we've heard about the tribe of Yada, the men of Yada, and what they have done. Now her priests have violated my law and have profaned my holy things. They have put no difference between the holy and the profane. Remember where these teachings are coming from. These teachings are coming from the Rabboni, from the rabbis, from the teachers. They've profaned my holy things. They've put no difference between the holy and the profane, and they have not taught the difference between the clean and the unclean. And they have shut their eyes to the keeping of my Sabbaths. They've shut their eyes to the keeping of my Sabbaths, and I am profaned among them. Remember what this new moon of green ears does. It sets the beginning of the sacred year, of Yahweh's feast year. And remember, within that feast year, the first day and the last day of the feast days are holy Sabbaths. They are high Sabbaths. So, in doing the ways that they've done, they've shut their eyes to the keeping of my Sabbaths. They've rejected Yahweh and his way. Her princes are in the midst of her are like wolves ravening the prey, shedding blood and destroying souls to acquire dishonest gain. Her prophets covered these deeds with whitewash, seeing false visions and divining lies to them, saying, "This is what Father Yahweh says," but Yahweh has not spoken. Keep that in mind as we go through some of this reading. And some of this reading can get pretty dry, but I'll do my best with it. But just look at the confusion. I want you to think about the confusion that they've thrown in there, and how they try to make these things, look so, look so right. But there's a warning about that. Look in 1 and 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Pastor covered this yesterday. He covered this scripture yesterday, and we need to bear this in mind. Keep this in heart. 1 Corinthians 11, chapter 11, verse 3. But I fear that by any means, as the serpent subtly deceived Eve with her craftiness. Think about the subtleness of what these people have done under the influence of Satan, to turn people from following the ordinance of Yahweh and to properly setting the feasts. As the serpent subtly deceived Eve with her craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted and led astray from the simplicity that is in Messiah. And keep that in mind too, and you're going to see how difficult their calculations and all of this is. It's a mess. It is a total mess. It's much easier to be obedient and say, okay, well, I'm going to look for the green ears of barley. Oh, there's a green ear of barley. Okay, now the next new moon is the first day of the first moon. How hard is that? It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. Verse 4, for he who comes preaches another Messiah, which we have not preached, or if you accept a different spirit, remember what Pastor showed us that spirit was. That spirit is the law, remember? So if you accept a different spirit or a different law, what's the Talmud? A book of traditions. It's a separate law. Think about that too. If you accept a different spirit or a different law, which you have not received, or another message which you have not accepted, you might well put up with him, and you might rather follow him. Continuing on in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, look at verse 13. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Messiah. And it's no marvel, for Satan herself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if her ministers are also transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. And we already kind of mentioned this here. What is their ultimate goal? Their ultimate goal is to take Yahweh completely out of the picture. It's just like science does today. If you go to an institute of higher learning, if you've ever gone there and you've listened to what they teach, it's all theory. It's all out of the imagination of their own hearts. They completely cut Yahweh out of the picture. You mention anything about Yahweh and they laugh at you. They say, well, that's just a myth. That's this, that's the other. I had a biology teacher do that. He said, well, we're going to give equal creation, equal time to the creation theory today. And it was about 2 seconds, and he made a mockery. He made a mockery of Yahweh's creation, of the creation of Yahweh, of creation. But that's got to remember, that's these institutes of higher learning. And remember where these institutes of higher learning came from. Remember, they came from Babylon. Babylon means what? Confusion, and that's what they teach. And that's what results from this. And this is what I want you to keep in mind as we try to go through this stuff this evening here. Okay, the Tekufa on page 47 or page 40 in the Old Book. It says, the early Israelites did not study the stars as did the Babylonians, Egyptians, and Greeks. It shows here that the study of astronomy, the computing of seasons and planets, and the knowledge of the moon order and the calendar intercalation was limited even during the time of the Talmud. It was only during the Middle Ages. I lost my place here. It was only during the Middle Ages that astronomy was seriously studied by the Jewish people. And Rashi, and that was from 1040 to 1105 AY, was one of the most respected and quoted astrologers in the Babylonian Talmud. So you can see already, he was one of the most respected in this Babylonian system. And then it says a Babylonian Amora claimed that he could calculate and adjust the feasts without consulting an eyewitness report of the new moon in Israel. So you can see how they started. Well, I can do this by calculation. We don't have to do it that way. We can do it this way. This is a new way. This is a better way. But it's not Yahweh's way. In addition to Abraham Ezra's works on astrology, calendars, and commentaries, he wrote the Sefer HaIbur, which deals with the subject of the cycles of the new moon seasons, the astrological tekufot, and the signs of the pagan zodiac, which are still being taught today by the assemblies who are deceived. And it says this, Ezra believed that all beings were influenced by the stars and the zodiac. Okay, so, and we'll get into this a little later, and I know it gets into it definitely later in the book. It talks about the zodiac, and it talks about more astrology, but it's the people, they were worshiping the gods that were behind the stars, behind the planets. And they believed that these beings, that these gods, whenever a person was born, that they exercised certain influences over the people. Okay, and we'll get into, like I said, we'll get into this a little bit later, but that should bring to mind, some things about one of the booklets I can remember just offhand that talks about that is should the house of Yahweh celebrate birthdays? Remember why the birthdays were celebrated? Who it was in honor of? It was in honor of the protective genus, the protective genie, the protective Juno or genie, or the protective god or goddess that was assigned to the individual at birth. Okay? And that was the reason for the presents. That was the reason for the birthday cakes. That was the reason for the candles and the blowing out the candles and for the prayers ascending up to the God to allow, being thankful for allowing that person to live another year and to see this person safely through for another year. That's where it all comes from. It all stems back to the worship of these gods. But in the Encyclopedia Judaica, Volume 3, page 798, shows what the astrological definition of the word tekufa is, which goes right along with the zodiac, which has only been brought forth by the Jews since the Middle Ages. And you think the Middle Ages, now think about, Pastor, and he shows a little bit later, I think he mentions it, or maybe he mentioned it last week, that the study of, that the ability to actually make these calculations and what they have done, what mankind has done, it wasn't possible. It wasn't even possible until the time of the Middle Ages, until much later in history. And this is what this shows here. This shows that that this astrological definition of the word Tekufa, which goes right along with the zodiac, has only been brought forth by the Jews since the Middle Ages. And the Middle Ages basically ranged from about 476 AY to about 1500 AY. Yeah, generally speaking, that's a pretty wide. It's a pretty wide breadth of a pretty wide area, but that's pretty close. But it says the 4 seasons are Tekufot. The change in the season and the comparison of the day and night are fairly well described. There are 4 seasons of the year, from the Nisan season to the Tammuz season. Now look at the names that they've got. The Nisan season, the Tammuz season. The day borrows from the night, and from Tammuz season to the Tishri season. The day repays the night. From the Tishri season to the Tevet season, the night borrows from the day, and the Tevet season to the Nisan season to the night repays where the night repays the day. And during the Nisan season and Tishri season, neither one owes anything to the other. Then he says, the pastor has underlined here, says Samuel gives reasonably accurate figures regarding the periods between the seasons, but when he discusses the fixing of the dates of the seasons, he allows imaginary bases to be included. Okay? You see what he did? He allows imaginary bases to be included. In other words, he just throws stuff in there from the imagination of his own heart. From whatever he dreamt up. Whatever he logically followed. But it shows here, it says the planets, the zodiac, stars, and comets. And Pastor shows here, he says the 12 signs of the zodiac and their relation to the months of the year are Aries, which is Nisan, Taurus, which is Iyar. Oh boy, some of these names. Gemini, Sivan, Cancer, Tammuz, Leo, Av, Virgo, Elul, Libra, Tishri, Scorpio, Marshevian, Sagittarius, Kilsev, Capricorn, Tevet, Aquarius, Shavat, and Pisces, Adar. And in the Traket, Erubian, Babylonian Talmud shows the complete treatise of the Tekufa developed by the Jewish astrologers, astronomers. Please note this fact, Pastor says. The formulas are based on exact mathematical calculation reduced to degrees, hours, and minutes. Okay? Reduced to degrees, hours, and minutes. Okay? And so that's... And he shows there, it says there were not even watches or clocks when the children of Israel came out of Egypt, much less advanced astronomical aids. And he shows here under this underlined part down here, says Samuel stated, and further on, when you look further back in this same article, in these same writings, you find out that Samuel was one of the rabbis. He was one of those gods that had been elevated. But it says, Rab Samuel stated, the vernal equinox occurs only at the beginning of one of the 4 quarters of the day, either at the beginning of the day or at the beginning of the night, or at midday or at midnight. Well, he's kind of covered things, a pretty wide range of stuff for the day. And he shows here, he says the summer solstice only occurs either at the end of 1.5 or at the end of 7.5 hours of the day or the night. The autumn equinox only occurs at the end of 3 or 9 hours of the day or the night. The winter solstice only occurs at the end of 4.5 or 10.5 hours of the day or the night. The duration of the season of the year is no longer than 91 days and 7.5 hours. So you see the confusion and you see the difficulty that they're throwing in here and trying to justify eliminating the simple way that Yahweh told us to do things in order to justify saying that the vernal equinox is this Tekufa that Yahweh was describing, and trying to justify their worship of the sun. It says the period intervening between an equinox and the following solstice, and between the solstice and the following equinox, as stated, is 91 days, 7.5 hours approximately. And then on the next page over, in the new book, it's on page 50. We're looking basically, man, at some of the underlying things here. The Trekate Breketh on page 370 shows that the only astronomical calculations show the vernal and autumn equinoxes change 50.1 seconds per arc each and every year because of the precession of the equinoxes. The signs of the pagan zodiac have also changed since 2,000 years ago. And so basically what they're saying, what he's saying is that the equinoxes have actually progressed through the year, and you don't have the same star clusters in the same spot of the sky as we did 2,000 years ago. It's progressed. It's changed its position throughout, in history, and it continues to do so. But here it shows the vernal or autumn equinox is not a fixed point in relation to the signs of the zodiac, but it keeps on changing its position to the extent of 50.1 seconds of arc per year. This movement, which is called a precession of the equinoxes, is due to the continual shifting of the point of intersection of the ecliptic with the equator. And basically, you see what I mean about see what I mean about the confusion that they're throwing in with this? The ecliptic is just a fancy word for the apparent path of the sun. So you can see the sun as it goes through the sky. You can see the apparent path that it takes. Well, as the Earth goes in its orbit around the sun, that apparent path changes throughout the year, and it actually kind of cycles through. Okay, that's the best way that's the easiest way that I can understand it. Okay, but it's talking about this progression. It's talking about this. It talks about how this precession of the equinoxes has actually progressed through, and it's not in the same constellation area or in the same area of the zodiac as they say. In Collier's Encyclopedia on Volume 2, page 594, it tells us Aries, the ram, a zodiacal constellation located somewhat north of the celestial equator, forms the first sign of the zodiac. However, because of the precession of the equinoxes, the sign now lies in Pisces, and Aries is the second constellation. And it says that it shows here the sun enters the sign on March 21st, and the constellation on April 18th. And in the 2nd century BC, it was noted the vernal equinox, or the position of the sun apparent on the first day of spring, was located in Aries, and on the first day of spring was called the first of Aries, and the precession has since moved the vernal equinox into Pisces. So basically, it's now the vernal that vernal equinox actually appears in a different part of the sky, in a different area of that constellation. And Pastor shows here, he says, even the rabbinical authorities could not settle on the controversy surrounding the problem of calculated seasons. So they even argue among themselves. They can't even come to an agreement. But it shows here, Pastor has underlined here, it says, it's well known that the intercalation of a year depends on minute calculations. And remember that intercalation means to insert something, or like a day, into a calendar. And, the great Khan last week when he gave class, he said that Yahweh accounts for that. Yahweh accounts for that insertion of an extra month. You know how he accounts for that? We go out and we observe for the new moon of green ears. If the green ears of barley are not seen before the next new moon, guess what? This is the 12th moon, right? So if the new moon, if the green ears are not seen before the next new moon, guess what takes place? We go into the 13th moon. Okay? However, if the green ears are seen prior to the next new moon, the next new moon will be the first day of the first moon. So see, Yahweh accounts for that. Does anybody get confused about some of the stuff that we're reading with what they're doing? I do. It is totally, it makes no sense to what they're doing. Yahweh's way is much simpler. Much simpler. And then I'm just going to read the underlined part here. It says, on account of the Tekufa, the solar year, which consists of 365 and a quarter days, is divided into 4 equal parts, each period consisting of 91 days and 7.5 hours. And then these are called respectively Nisan, which is the vernal, Tammuz, which is summer, Tishri, which is autumn, and Tebeth, or which is winter, Tekuphoth. It says the lunar year, which forms the basis of our calendar, comprises altogether of 354 days. Although according to biblical tradition, our months are to be lunar. Now look what they say. According to Scripture, they kind of twist the words in there. Remember the unlearned and unstable do what? They twist the Scriptures to their own destruction. So what did they just say here? According to biblical tradition, our months are to be lunar. It's not biblical tradition, it's biblical commandment, it's biblical law. It is Yahweh's law that this is how they're to be done. But they say, oh, it's biblical tradition. Yet our festivals are to be observed at certain agricultural seasons. Passover and Pentecost in the spring, tabernacles or the Feast of Ingathering in the autumn. In order to harmonize the lunar and solar years, a second Adar is intercalated once every 2 or 3 years. Our text lays down certain principles by which the intercalators are to be guided. So, you see it's in order what they're trying to do. What are they trying to do? They're trying to harmonize the lunar and solar years. They're 2 completely separate things. We don't even calculate. We don't even observe a solar year. The sun wasn't used to mark the years. It was the cycle of the moon. It was the months. First moon, second moon, all the way through the 12th moon, and if need be, a 13th moon. How do the Scriptures, how is it mentioned when the prophets? In the 24th day of the 7th moon. It doesn't say on there on the 24th day of the I wouldn't even know how to put that one. I wouldn't even know how to put that one on the 24th day after the vernal equinox, or after the 3rd month after the vernal equinox, or before. I don't even know how you would put it. But one master holds that the whole Feast of Ingathering is required to be included in the new Tishri. The other, only that part of the festival must be included. Now, which view will they adopt? See, they've got confusion among themselves. That Babylonian system, that system of confusion. They've got confusion. They've got disunity. And they've got their own private interpretations that they're throwing in on top of that. On top of that, they're creating their own traditions and setting aside the law of Yahweh. An objection is raised. The Tekufa day concludes the previous season. This is Rab Judah's view. Rab Jose, I guess that is Jose, maintains that it commences the new. So one says it's the end, one says it's the beginning. They can't figure it out among themselves. It says neither considered the possibility of including a full month of 30 days, and were so giving 1 day more, because if Elul were extended, it would interfere with the calculations whereby the first day of the new year must, now I don't know where they're getting this, where the first day of the new year must not fall on a Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday, with reference to the day on which the sun enters into the new Tekufa, the day on which the new Tekufa begins. And I have no idea where they got that can't fall on whatever day of the week. Either the first day, the 4th day, or the 6th day. I have no idea where they get that. Okay, on page 54. On page 54 up here at the toward the it's 54 in the old book, and I'm going to guess it's probably about 46, maybe 45 in the old book, maybe. But this underlined part here, where it's number 6, it says the difficulty remained unsolved. They can't resolve it among themselves. They differ as to whether the Tekufa day completed the previous or begins the next cycle. So it's it's that utter confusion. And then they continue their discovery. They have these contradictions, and then they have these other ideas about, well, why not intercalate a day and a dar? Jacob said that, and then it shows that they hold that the whole feast of ingathering must fall in the new Tekufah, including also the first day of the feast. Although the first day of Passover must not fall. Now I don't know where they get this. Although the first day of the Passover must not fall on a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, and the addition of a day might cause that, it would not matter because of the limitation of the days on which Passover may commence is due to the desire to avoid the new year falling on a Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday. And I don't understand that one. And that could be avoided by adding a day to one of the normally defective months between Nisan and Tishri. So they call it normally defective. So they're saying that their own system of calculations is flawed. It's defective. Okay? It's just crazy, the things that they're doing and what they're trying to, and the confusion that they throw in that. Now, praise Yahweh, we're done with that mess. We're all done with that, with this. And that was, like I said, the thing to get out of that. Man, the main thing to get out of that is the utter confusion that they have amongst themselves and how they've complicated something so simple. But and they've complicated something that was so simple. It would be much easier, and it would benefit them so much if they would simply humble themselves and obey Yahweh. That would be the simplest thing to do. Now on page 56 in the new book, I'm not sure what page we are in the old, but it's the Encyclopedia Volume 3, Encyclopedia Judaica Volume 3, pages 788 to 789, talking about astrology. Okay, astrology, Bible and Apocrypha. There is no explicit mention of astrology in the Bible, but two biblical passages dealing with the diviner and with the soothsayer, that's Leviticus 19:26 and Deuteronomy 18:10, were understood by the rabbis as bearing relation to astrology. The ancient Israelites did not study the stars or astronomy, for they refrained from too close observation of the celestial bodies out of fear of idolatry or God worship. In Deuteronomy 14:9 it says, "And when you look up to the sky and behold the sun and the moon and the stars, the whole heavenly host, you must not be lured into bowing down to them or serving them." You must not be lured. You must not be tempted into doing that. But see, this is what the rabbis have done in using the sun to set the feast, because it is being done in honor of the sun god Baal. It's not been done in honor to Yahweh. It is being done in honor of the gods. So we see here about the zodiac. So what is a zodiac? Uh-oh. Did I get... Okay, we'll do it that way. Okay. The zodiac. This is from Wikipedia, and it says, the zodiac is an area of the sky that extends approximately 8 degrees north or south of the ecliptic, that is, the apparent path of the sun across the celestial sphere over the course of the year. So if like I said, the sun's path changes. It goes to the north, it goes to the south, but it's that path. And the path of the moon and the visible planets are also within that belt of the zodiac. They kind of follow that same pattern. In Western astrology and formerly astronomy, the zodiac is divided into 12 signs, each occupying 30 degrees of celestial longitude, roughly corresponding to the constellations. And we see the constellations that are listed there: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Okay? And the zodiac was used, notice, it was used by the Roman era, And it was based on concepts inherited by the Hellenistic astronomy from, notice, it was from the Babylonian astronomy of the Chaldean period, which was the mid-1st century BY, which in turn derived from an earlier system of lists of stars along the ecliptic, or along that path. The construction of the zodiac is described in Ptolemy's vast 2nd century work, The Alchemist. Now notice it says here that although the zodiac remains the basis of the ecliptic coordinate system used in astronomy, the term and the names of the 12 signs are today mostly associated with horoscopic astrology. Okay? Now, Pastor he says that it is a fact here. He says that astrology or astronomy has everything to do with bowing down and serving the sun, the moon, the stars, and the heavenly host. That is the beings that were in charge of that when they are used to set a feast. For by looking up and beholding the heavenly host and worshiping them is the only possible way for anyone to keep a feast based upon the sighting of the vernal equinox. The prophet Isaiah condemned those who trusted in astrologers and the stargazers, saying in Isaiah 47, 12 through 13, it says, "Now stand fast now with your enchantments and the multitude of your sorceries, in which you have labored from your youth. It may be you will succeed, it may be you will prevail," that is to cause terror. "If you are wearied in the multitude of your counsels, let now the astrologers, the stargazers, and the monthly prognosticators stand up and save you from these things which will come upon you." In Isaiah 8, 19 through 20, "And when they say to you, seek those who have familiar spirits, and to wizards who peep and mutter. Should not a people seek their Father? Should they not seek the living over the dead? To the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them." Okay, and so you can see here, these are the respective signs of of the zodiac, these 12 signs, and about where they appear in the celestial sphere, I guess you could call it that. Okay. And remember, it was talked about that these signs are more associated with horoscopic astrology. Okay. Now think about what they said. Should we not seek the living over the dead? Should we not ask or inquire of Yahweh, as opposed to these gods, the gods who cannot hear, they can't speak, they can't give you anything? But this is what developed out of that. Now, under horoscope astrology, it says it can, in essence, be summed up as the practice of casting astrological charts that reflect the apparent positions of a variety of celestial bodies and points from the perspective of the subject at any given moment in time. Okay, so you can see that they're consulting the gods when they do this. The most prevalent application of this horoscopic astrology is used to analyze birth charts of individuals in order to read character, psychological traits, and to some extent, destiny. In theory, however, a horoscope can be cast from the beginning of any entity, notice this, including organizations, nations, animals, objects, including like ships, cars, and airplanes, consulting these things. And remember what they're consulting. They're consulting the beings behind this. They are worshiping these beings. And there's actually 4 different types of that. And something that comes to mind, I can remember growing up. My mom had a friend who would not go out of the house unless she grabbed that paper and checked her horoscope for the day to see what kind of day she was going to have. Okay? And you get people, and it was, this is going to take place. Nope, I can't go out today because it says this here. And her life would revolve around that. Now, that might be kind of an extreme. Maybe, I don't know. But these things are still printed in the papers today. People still look at that stuff today, and it's still a huge business. But there's 4 types of this. One of them is called one of them is called that natal astrology, also known as genetical. Genetical. I don't know. Astrology. It's the system of astrology based on the concept that each individual's personality or path in life can be determined by constructing a natal chart for the exact date and time and location of the person's birth. That those gods would somehow have that influence over that individual and shape that individual's character, shape everything about that individual. And then the one below that, they have mundane astrology, also known as political astrology, is the application of astrology to world affairs and world events, taking its name from the Roman word mundus, meaning the world. Mundane astrology is a branch of judicial astrology and is widely believed by astrological historians to be the most ancient branch. By many modern and existent mundane astrologers also believe correlations exist between geological phenomenon, such as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, etc., and astronomical phenomena with the movement of the celestial bodies in relation to the earth. So that, because this planet is lined up with this one here and this god is lined up with this one here, then that's the reason we're having this earthquake over here. That's the reason we're having global warming, is because of the way the planets are lining up. No, the reason the world is in the shape it's in is not because of the way the planets are lining up. It's because of the character of mankind and what they have done in rejecting Yahweh. The next one. Electional astrology concerns itself with determining the most auspicious moment to begin an enterprise or undertaking, such as starting a business or founding an organization. Now look what they're asking. They're doing exactly over here what Isaiah 8:19 says, don't do. He says, when they say to you, seek those who have familiar spirits, and to wizards who peep and mutter, should a people not seek their Father? Should they not consult Yahweh? Should not they consult their counselor? Should they not consult the priest? Should they not consult and ask at Abel? But no, they consult the stars. It's to take into account the individual person or persons involved and the place where the action is to be performed to suggest the best time to perform the activity. Then you have that horary astrology as a method by which an astrologer attempts to answer specific questions. Notice, again, who are they saying to consult? The wizards who peep and mutter. Okay? By constructing a horoscope for the exact time and place which the question was asked, that the answer might be a simple yes or no, but it is, in general, more complex with insights into, for example, the motives of the questioner, the motives of others involved in the matter, and the options available to them. So you can kind of see, see how this all of this ties into, it all ties in together, and just how deep it is, and even when we look at it, it's just how ridiculous it is. But you can see what they've done. You can see how they're displacing Yahweh. You see how they're attempting to displace Yahweh by taking away the way that Yahweh says his feasts are going to be set. They take away his authority. They take away his say in it. They say, well, it's not Yahweh. It's the way that the stars are lining up. It's the way. It's all of this. It's these calculations explain it away. The calculations are flawed. They already said the calculations were flawed. We know the calculations are flawed. Because it's not done according to the law of Yahweh. The law of Yahweh is perfect. You can't add to it. You can't take away from it. And they've taken away the authority of going to and asking at Abel. It was said long ago, to seek an answer, ask at Abel. Go to the priests. Go to your counselors. And let them guide you in the laws of Yahweh. Don't do as they're saying here to do, and consult these wizards who peep and mutter, and consult these things, and what options do they have for you? They can't answer. Okay, but then and then we're informed of the following: the lunar year, which forms the basis of our calendar, comprises altogether 354 days, though according to biblical tradition, our months are to be lunar. We read that. Okay, we read that, and it's reiterated again. And then they say, our text lays down certain principles by which the intercalculators are to be guided. So you see that they've rejected the law of Yahweh for their own traditions. And they're elevating themselves and their traditions above Yahweh. And they admit that according to the scriptures, the months are to be lunar, but yet they have a better way. They have a new way. And Pastor says to you and this, I love this. This is plain and simple and to the point. Pastor is very direct. He says, I say to you, there are two principles by which the insertion of the necessary extra month could be guided. One, by the pagan astrologers, astronomers, whose origins go back to the worship of the goddess of the dawn, or by Yahweh's ordinances, which would make this necessary intercalation Yahweh's way. These are the only choices we have. One is life, and the other is death. He puts it. He just puts it so succinctly, so straight and to the point. It's black and white. There's no question there. Since the Jewish year, then continuing on down here, it says that Tricate Hashem on page 278 informs us, since the Jewish year, which is lunar, is some 11 days shorter than the solar year, it is necessary periodically to lengthen it by intercalation. It's done by Yahweh's way. In ancient times, this was done not by mathematical calculation. What? Did you see that? What was that? In ancient times, it was not done by mathematical calculations as nowadays. It wasn't done that way back then. And it's not supposed to be done that way now. But according to the exigencies of the moment. But this had to be done before Nisan actually commenced, okay? But it had to be done according to the exigencies of the moment. The exigencies of the moment, Pastor describes here, were the actual observation of the agricultural conditions in progress. By actual observation, one could know if the barley were in the ear or whether it was not, before the next anticipated new moon. If it were not in the ear, then an extra moon could be added to bring about Yahweh's feast in their season, without resorting to astronomers or astrologers to calculate their Tekufa seasons of equinoxes and solstices of the sun, either with the modern mathematical equipment or with the ancient sacred poles. And we're going to get into those ancient sacred poles a little bit later in the book. Which is all, and it doesn't matter which is done, if it's done by the calculations or by the sacred poles. It's the same pagan worship of the heavenly bodies, which have nothing to do with the ordinance of the green ears of barley. The next section, I'm on page 58 of the new book. I'm not sure what page we're on in the old one, but it says the title is the Tekufa by the Scriptures. Now we're getting away from the confusion. We're getting away from the we're getting away from the way it was done in Babylon, from this Babylonian confusion. Now let's see, Tekufa by the Scriptures. In the Holy Scriptures, there are 4 scriptures which deal with the Hebrew word tekupha written in them. They are Exodus 34:22, 1 Samuel 1:20, 2 Chronicles 24:23, and Psalm 19:6. The assemblies who teach the lie of the equinoxes make this statement. Tekupha appears 4 times in the Hebrew Scriptures and at least twice refers to the calendar year. Okay? The deceived assemblies who are now following the Babylonian sun worship effectively twist the meaning of the scripture of the word tekupha in order to justify their use of the equinoxes, effectively using sun worship to set their own festivals rather than obeying Yahweh and using his ordinances to set his feasts. And we mentioned this scripture earlier, but take a look here. Take a look here at 2 Kepha chapter 3, verse 16. It says, those who are unlearned and unstable, notice what they do. They twist the other scriptures. They twist the scriptures to their own destruction. Okay? Rather than be humble and rather than obey Yahweh, they would rather twist the scriptures to fit what they want to believe, to make it fit what they want it to say. But in doing so, they do that to their own destruction. There's no reward. There's no beneficial reward. There's nothing positive that comes from that. If the preachers from these particular assemblies would bring out the scriptural and true meanings of the Hebrew word tekupha, then they could not twist these scriptures to their own advantage or their own destruction. Their claim that tekupha means a solar sun year of seasons set according to the sun equinoxes and sun solstice. That's their claim. However, a thorough study of the word tekupha in each of the scriptures which is mentioned shows that it has a completely different meaning. In each of the 4 previously listed scriptures, the word tekupha is word number 8622 in Strong's Hebrew Dictionary, and it shows a revolution, a circuit, to come about, to end. And it says word number 8622 comes from word 5362, which means to strike, to knock together, to surround or to circulate, to compass about. So you can see, and to enclose, to go around, to enclose around. And Pastor shows here, he says, merely by reading the definitions of the Hebrew words tekupha and nakaf, notice what he says. The rest of that paragraph. Without studying these words in the context of each individual scripture, one probably would not have any more knowledge than before they read those definitions. Okay? Remember, Pastor shows, he says we have to take our time and we have to read and read every word. Don't think, oh yes, this is what it says, and just kind of go through it thinking we know what it means. Sometimes we got to dig a little deeper. Sometimes we've got to look a little bit, and we can do that, by doing exactly what Pastor's already done the work for us here, because he's going to show us exactly where these words come from and what they mean. And as we get into it next week, he actually breaks them down, Exodus 34:22, by Jewish astrologers and astronomers. And he says, Exodus 34:22 scripturally. And then he goes to the next one, but what they twisted, how they twisted, and then, nope, this is what it means scripturally. And he's going to break each one of those down. And we can study that, we can look at that, and we can study those very things, and have a much better understanding, of these things. The Gesenius Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon of the Old Testament Scriptures at page 873 shows the definition of the word tekupha, which comes to the word nakaf, which shows after the course of a year. And it says 2 Chronicles 24:23, compare Exodus 34:22. And it says tekupha is derived of the word kuf, which is a synonym of the word nakaf. In other words, it has a similar meaning. The word nakaf is found on page 566 of Gesenius Lexicon, and it means let the feast go their round. That is, when the circle of the yearly feast is ended, after the space of a year. Other Hebrew lexicons agree with the fact that nakaf, which is a synonym of the word tekupha, means feast circuit. And the Analytical and Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon of the Old Testament by Benjamin Davidson says that very thing on page 562. You can see the underlined part there. It says, let the feast go or come around. The definition of these words describe Yahweh's feast circuit, his sacred holy year. Yahweh's year, as we have already proven, begins in the spring of the year, counting from Yahweh's new moon of green ears of barley, on the 15th day of Yahweh's first holy day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and ends on the last great day at the end of Yahweh's sacred year, a year consisting of 7 moons in which Yahweh's feasts are celebrated. Scripturally, Tekufa and its synonyms mean the feast go around, the feast circuit, or more correctly, Yahweh's sacred year. So will kind of bring us to the end of tonight's class. And we'll leave off here on page 60 of the new book, and we're gonna say about 54, 55, I'm guessing, on the old book. But we'll pick up next week. The Great Hall pick up next week by the astrologers and astronomers, or by the scriptures. So with that, may Yahweh be with you. May Yahweh bless your work week.